Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. We're diving headfirst into this past Serie A weekend, the one right after that springtime change. You know, the one where everybody's clocks get all messed up. But we're not going to get bogged down in the minute-by-minute replays. Instead, we're laser-focused on those big moments, the surprises, and the key changes that you really need to know.
That's right. We've sifted through all the match reports, the post-game analysis, you name it. And we're here to extract those nuggets of gold, those insights that tell us where things might be headed in Serie A.
So where do we even start with this one? I mean, one thing that jumped out at me right away was the unusually low number of goals across the league. Just 15 total in 8 matches. Makes you wonder if the players were still adjusting to that time change. You know, a bit sluggish, maybe?
Well, it's definitely a talking point, isn't it? And it wasn't just the low score lines. It was also a general lack of major upsets. Of course, there were exceptions. And one that really caught my eye was Fiorentina's win against Atalanta. Now, that was a result that not many people saw coming.
Yeah, Fiorentina taking down Atalanta. That's a big one, especially considering where both teams are in the table.
Exactly. And I think what makes this result so interesting is what it means for the race for the Champions League spots. Atalanta had been building up some good momentum, so this loss really throws a wrench in their plans. They're still right in the mix, but they can't afford too many more slip-ups like this.
Definitely a setback for them. But on the flip side, it was a huge boost for Fiorentina, and for Moise Kean in particular. I mean, 24 goals this season, that's an incredible return. And the way he scored that winning goal, it was like something out of a highlight reel.
Yeah, his movement was fantastic. They were saying in the reports that he's always connected, always aggressive. And that goal really exemplified that. He wins the ball back in midfield and just blows past Udinese. They were describing him as a tank, which is pretty accurate. Over 40 meters with the ball at his feet, keeps his cool, cuts onto his right foot, sees the keeper, Carnesecchi, leaning slightly to his left, and just slots it into the bottom corner. Clinical.
It was described as, and I love this, the goal every great striker must know how to score. It's like they're saying, okay, Moise Kean has officially arrived.
Right. At 25, it feels like he's finally realizing that potential everyone saw in him. And it's interesting because a lot of this comes down to decision-making in those key moments. When he was younger, maybe he would have rushed that shot or tried to overpower it. But now there's a composure there, an understanding of how to pick his spot.
And naturally, when a striker starts banging in goals like that, the transfer rumors start swirling. They're saying his release clause is $52 million, which, for those who aren't familiar with these things, basically means that any club willing to pay that amount can bypass Juventus and go straight to Kean and negotiate a contract. So you have to think there are going to be some big clubs sniffing around.
Absolutely. Napoli are being mentioned as a possible destination, especially if they end up selling Osimhen, who's obviously been fantastic for them. And you have to imagine some Premier League clubs might be tempted to take another look. Yeah. Remember, he had that tough spell at Everton a few years back, only 4 goals in 39 appearances. But he's a completely different player now.
Yeah, it's a great example of how a change of scenery, a different system, a bit more confidence, it can all come together and really unlock a player's potential.
And to be fair to Kean, his time at Everton coincided with a period of upheaval at the club. They had several managerial changes, different systems being tried out, and it's tough for any young player to find his feet in that kind of environment.
Okay, let's move on to another big match from the weekend. Inter taking on Udinese. Now, on paper, this looked like a pretty straightforward win for Inter, but as we know, football rarely goes according to the script.
Yeah, and this one definitely had its twists and turns. Inter started off well enough. They were up 2 goals at halftime against an Udinese side that looked, well, let's just say they weren't at their sharpest. The report used the term ball near to describe them, which basically means they were playing like they were already on a beach somewhere, relaxing, not the intensity you'd expect from Udinese.
It sounds like Udinese were almost sleepwalking through that first half. But for Inter, it was a chance for some key players to shine. Federico Di Marco coming back from injury, he had a great game, set up both of those early goals.
Yeah, he was really influential. And those contributions from the substitutes, Arnautovic and Frattesi, were also crucial, especially with Barella suspended for this one and with other players maybe feeling a bit fatigued at this point in the season. That squad depth could be vital for Inter down the stretch.
No doubt about it. But then, just when it looked like Inter were cruising to victory, things got a bit interesting. Udinese, kind of out of nowhere, pulled a goal back. Solè waked up the ball in midfield, went on a 40-meter run. The report suggests Correa didn't exactly put up much resistance, and then he unleashes this shot that Sommer just couldn't get to. And suddenly, the mood at the San Siro shifts completely. A little bit of nervousness creeping in for Inter.
Well, you can never count Udinese out, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it does raise questions about Inzaghi's in-game management. Maybe, with a 2-goal lead, he got a little bit complacent, thinking the 3 points were already in the bag.
Yeah, you wonder if maybe he made those substitutions, Asllani and Correa coming on a little too early, and if that disrupted the team's rhythm a bit and allowed Udinese back into the game.
It's possible. But you also have to give credit to Udinese for not giving up. They kept fighting, and they almost snatched a point at the end there.
Thankfully for Inter, Sommer made a couple of big saves in those final few minutes to preserve the win. And the report really emphasizes the mindset of the Inter fans right now. They're not worried about style points. They just want to see their team win no matter how they do it.
And that's the mentality you need at this stage of the season. Every point is precious, especially with that massive Coppa Italia derby against Milan coming up next week.
Speaking of injuries and big games coming up, it's worth mentioning the report also talked about Bayern Munich having some injury concerns. Davies, Upamecano, and Ito are all carrying knocks. It just goes to show the kind of pressure and fatigue these players are under at this point in the season.
It's a reminder that this isn't just a physical battle, it's a mental one too. And as we head into the final stretch of the season, that mental resilience, that ability to cope with pressure and fatigue, it's going to be crucial.
And speaking of crucial, let's dissect the Napoli-Milan game, because that one, from what I've read, was a wild ride. And even before kickoff, it sounds like both teams were dealing with some, shall we say, unexpected challenges. There were reports of illness affecting a key player for Napoli, although the source seems to have gotten that a bit mixed up. They mentioned McTominay, but it must have been a Milan player they were talking about. Especially considering they also mentioned Loftus-Cheek's appendicitis, which is apparently going to keep him out for another month.
Yeah, losing Loftus-Cheek is a blow for Milan. He's been a key part of their midfield this season. And the match itself, well, it was described as absurd, strange, schizophrenic. So pretty much business as usual for Milan then.
Right. Milan seemed to have a knack for making things more complicated than they need to be. And this match was a prime example. I mean, they conceded another early goal, their third time this season, letting one in within the first 2 minutes. And they also missed another penalty. That's their fourth missed penalty this season, each one taken by a different player.
Apparently, that's a statistical oddity for Milan that hasn't been seen in 70 years. You have to wonder what's going on there. Are they overthinking it? Are they not practicing enough? Or is it just bad luck?
Who knows? But it's certainly not helping their cause. And then there's the ongoing saga of Rafael Leão being benched. That's another decision that has a lot of people scratching their heads. The report even goes so far as to call it another self-inflicted problem for the Portuguese coach.
Especially when you consider that he opted to start João Felix instead. And then you factor in the comments from Felix's agent, who claims that the player is practically on his way to Galatasaray. And get this, that agent also happens to be the same one who represents Conchacao. So it's all a bit messy. You can't help but wonder if there are other factors at play here beyond just tactical decisions.
It certainly adds another layer of intrigue to the whole situation. But while Milan were busy shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak, Napoli really took advantage, especially in that first half. They went into the break 2 goals up, Lukaku bagging a brace. Although the report describes his second goal as a bit scrappy, kind of a pinball situation in the box, but effective nonetheless.
Yeah, sometimes you just need a bit of luck, and Napoli certainly had that on their side for that second goal. But then, as we've seen a few times this season, they seem to take their foot off the gas in the second half, a bit like what we saw against Fiorentina.
Almost as if they thought the job was done. But Milan, despite all their problems, they kept fighting. And eventually, Leão came off the bench, apparently carrying a bit of a knock, so that's another thing for Milan fans to worry about. But he still managed to win that penalty. And the report points out that Theo Hernandez also had a really strong second half, which just makes those decisions regarding Leão even more puzzling.
You can see why some Milan fans are frustrated. They have this incredibly talented player in Leão, but he's not being utilized consistently. And the report even highlights that Leão has caused Napoli problems in the past, so you have to wonder why he wasn't given more of a chance in this game.
It's a head-scratcher for sure. But hey, at least Milan's youth team had a good weekend. They picked up a late win against Lecce in Serie C with a 95th-minute winner.
And Zlatan Ibrahimovic was back at the stadium to watch them. He played a big part in building that youth setup, so it must have been good for him to see them get a result like that. Maybe a bit of a boost for the whole club.
It's interesting though, right? Because even with this loss, Napoli still boast a fantastic record against the other big teams this season. They're still undefeated in 6 matches against Inter, Juventus, and Milan. That's their best run against those rivals since the 1985-86 season.
It's a testament to the work Luciano Spalletti has done. They're a tough team to beat, no matter who the opponent is.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about Atalanta for a moment.
Yeah.
Because that loss to Fiorentina, it's being seen by some as a potential turning point for them. Not just because of the result itself, but because of the way they play. They didn't even manage a shot on goal, which is the first time that's happened to them away to Fiorentina in 2 years.
Yeah.
That's got to sting a bit.
Yeah, it's a worrying sign for sure. And there's some serious questions being asked about Gasperini's tactical decisions in that game. He took off both Lukman and Koop Miners, his 2 top scorers, with still half an hour to play and with the score at 1-0.
Some people are suggesting that maybe even the players have just given up trying to understand his logic sometimes.
I mean, I get it, right? Sometimes you got to trust your gut as a manager. But when you're taking off your 2 most dangerous attacking players in a tight game, you're bound to raise a few eyebrows.
You'd think so. But hey, Gasperini has earned the right to make those calls, I suppose. He's done a fantastic job at Atalanta. But it does feel like maybe they're hitting a bit of a ceiling now. It'll be interesting to see how they respond in these next few weeks, especially with the race for those Champions League spots heating up.
Speaking of teams in good form, we have to talk about Bologna. They continued their impressive run with a 1-0 win over Venezia. Orsolini scored a beauty in person. One of those goals that you just have to watch to appreciate.
And they've got a tough run of fixtures coming up. Napoli, Atalanta, and Inter are all on the horizon. But the feeling is that they might actually be in better shape than all 3 of those teams right now.
It's amazing what Thiago Motta has done there. They're playing with a confidence and swagger that we haven't seen from them in years.
And finally, we have to touch on Igor Tudor's debut as Juventus coach. Now, he's a former Juve player himself, and it seems like he's already making a strong connection with the players and the fans, which, is something that maybe Thiago Motta struggled with a bit.
There's definitely a sense that Tudor understands the club's DNA, what it means to wear that black and white shirt. And most importantly, he got the win in his first game in charge, a 1-0 victory over Empoli.
And it sounds like he's already stamping his authority on the team. The report talks about him implementing a more aggressive, man-marking style of play, quite a contrast to Motta's more possession-based approach.
There's even talk about this specific accelerated throw-in routine he's brought in. And he didn't hesitate to bring in some big names straight away. Chiesa and Vlahovic were both in the starting lineup. And on the flip side, Colombo, who was practically undroppable a month ago, didn't even get on the pitch.
It's a clear message from Tudor that he's not afraid to make tough decisions, and that he's here to win. So, to sum it all up for you, it was a strange weekend in Serie A. Not a lot of goals, but plenty of talking points. Fiorentina's win against Atalanta was a big shock, and we continue to see some inconsistent form from both Milan and Napoli.
You said it. Hopefully this deep dive has given you a good grasp of what went down and what it all means for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up, here's a question for you to ponder. Think about all the surprises we've discussed. Keane's goal-scoring streak, Gasperini's substitutions, Milan's up-and-down form. Which of these do you think will have the biggest impact on the final Serie A table? Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Until then.
See you.